After a fairly decent first half of baseball for the New York Mets this season, David Stearns is going to have to be super aggressive and perhaps go all in at this upcoming MLB trade deadline. And that's exactly what we're talking about right here on the True Mets Talk podcast. It's your boy CP. Smash those thumbs up buttons for me. Subscribe to the channel. All that fun stuff. Comment your thoughts and opinions. Do you believe and David Stearns to get the job done this deadline, or are you on the fence and waiting to see what happens? Let me know in the comments section, because the Mets are in a position right now, 13 games over 500. Yes, they had a brutal 3-week stretch, but things could have been a lot worse. They could be 5 to 6 games back in the division instead of only a half game back behind the Phillies. They could not be holding a wild card spot right now at all, but yet they still do. But make no mistake about it. The point of this video is that the Mets need to go all in, and we are going to get all the answers that we need about David Stearns and this Mets front office and how much they believe in this team to make a true championship World Series run this season. And I'm not talking about 2026. I'm not talking about 2027. Because if you remember, back in 2023, under Billy Epler, when they sold off all the pieces and basically gave up in the second half of the season, which was the right decision, that was all to set up this moment right here in 2025. It wasn't to wait until 2027 or 2028 to compete, because if you remember what Max Scherzer said, he said 2024 is an evaluation year and they're going for it. And they told me they're going for it in 2025. And guess what time it is, ladies and gentlemen, Mets fans? It is 2025. The Mets have all the pieces in the world right now to get the job done and fill multiple holes on this roster, because even though the reinforcements are back, especially in the rotation, there are still major holes with this team that need to be filled in order to be a true championship roster, championship caliber roster in a strong National League. And getting the likes of Sean Manaea and Kodai Senga, who shined in their performances against the Royals just a few days ago, helps, but more help externally needs to be on the way. And same thing with the bullpen. They're going to be getting Jose Butto back and Brooks Raley as well in the second half, but they need more. Realistically, we're looking at 4 pieces that the Mets need: a starting pitcher, 2 bullpen arms, and an impactful bat. An impactful bat. Is it realistic to ask David Stearns to make all 4 trades and get all 4 of these needs in blockbuster trades? The answer to that is no. But for me, a person who's been a David Stearns believer from the start, I need to see some action. There needs to be at least 2 major trades. Let's say they go out and get a high leverage bullpen arm to go alongside Edwin Diaz, and that's one of their splashes. They still have room to get a lower tier reliever, maybe one that's a little bit underrated and flying under the radar that not many people are talking about, but can still help this team in the earlier innings of a ball game. And I talked about multiple on my channel already. I talked about Kyle Finnegan. I talked about Dennis Santana, Carlos Estevez. I've talked about maybe the possibility of Aroldis Chapman, although I don't think it's going to happen. But I've talked about the possibility. We've talked about starting pitchers. I've made all these videos and I'm going to continue making these videos. So this is where I tell you again to subscribe and not miss out on any content, because I got a lot more trade talks and targets on the way for you all before the deadline in just a couple of weeks. And all the videos that I've released, I'll link them in the description down below for you all to go check out after you watch this video, because it just sets up the whole story and the whole narrative that I'm trying to portray in this video, that David Stearns needs to be aggressive and go all in for 2025. Now, there are some prospects, again, that are probably going to be off the table. It does help out a little bit the notion that David Stearns could be aggressive this deadline, because he's not really tied into Many of these prospects, meaning a lot of the MLB ready talent and prospects in this farm system, came under a previous regime before David Stearns, and maybe he's not quite attached to them like we all think. And maybe he's more willing to move those pieces if necessary. A couple of names that stand out to me that probably aren't going to get moved and probably shouldn't get moved is Carson Bench. I think he's the best hitting prospect that the Mets have right now. Nolan McLean is not going anywhere, and Jonah Tong shouldn't go anywhere. I think you can add Brandon Spurl onto that list. He is struggling in AAA, but recently he's found his stride and he is lowering some of those numbers. And a lot of people think that Brandon Spurl could be the first prospect called up in the second half of this 2025 season to help the Mets out, whether it's in the bullpen or whether it's in the starting rotation. But everybody else really should be on the table. And even outside of those names, the Mets have the prospects at all levels, even MLB ready talent right now, to make these moves happen. And so I always say this: scared money doesn't make any money. And this is going to apply to David Stearns, and we're going to get all the answers that we need from him by the way he goes about this deadline. Because last year, when it was a quote unquote evaluation year, that's fine. They went and got Paul Blackburn, Jesse Winker, Huascar Brazaban. Little bit underwhelming, but in the end, and Ryan Stanek as well. But in the end, they made the NLCS, and it was a successful year by the standards of which the evaluation year was set. But now, again, we heard it from Max Scherzer 2 years ago that the Mets are going for it in 2025. You've got Drew Gilbert, Ryan Clifford, Jeremy Rodriguez, Jesus Baez, just to name a few prospects that are hovering in the Mets organization that can be moved. Jet Williams to add on to that as well, even though he's having a bounce back type of season, he should be on the trade block. MLB ready talent. Nobody is off the table. If you are telling me hypothetically that you can go out there and target a guy like Eugenio Suarez, who's going to have a lot of teams asking and inquiring to the D-backs about him, but you have to move a guy like Mark Vientos or Ronnie Mauricio in the process to do so, I'm doing that every single day of the week. Every single day of the week. Ronnie Mauricio, Mark Vientos, Luis Angel Acuna, Brett Beatty. None of those guys should be off the table if it takes those names to make something happen and make this team better. Because I'm sorry, with the underproduction that this Mets offense had given us and given the pitching staff minimal help, when this team was founded on its offense, things need to change in the second half. And if you're telling me that the Mets are going to rely on Mark Vientos, even though he's been doing better over the past week and putting better swings on the baseball and finding more success, if you're telling me that the Mets and David Stearns are going to have to rely on him to turn it around, and they're going to have to rely on Ronnie Mauricio to be infinitely better, same thing with Brett Beatty, that's less likely to help the team than a guy like Eugenio Suarez, if the Mets are truly after a bat like Suarez, because there's minimal impactful bats on the market. Cedric Mullins is not going to move the needle for this team. Neither is Luis Robert. There's a handful of bats that I can think that can move the needle. If Byron Buxton is willing to waive his no trade clause, he's another one, alongside Eugenio Suarez. I have no confidence that the Red Sox are going to be dealing Jarren Duran, but if they do, he's probably the third one that I would think of. A lot more arms to be had than bats this coming trade deadline. So that's going to make things very tricky for the New York Mets and David Stearns. But when I talk about the philosophy, and we all know that David Stearns does have a philosophy when it comes to the trade deadline and his offseason acquisitions, that needs to change. Cannot be scared in the year 2025 when we have championship caliber aspirations. I'll say that one more time. You cannot be scared if you're David Stearns and the Mets to do what it takes when you have championship caliber aspirations this season, not in 2026, not in 2027, this season. Because as tough as the National League is, there is not one clear favorite right now. A lot of teams are neck and neck with the Mets, the Phillies, the Padres, the Dodgers. had just lost 7 in a row to end the first half, right? And a handful of other teams are right there. It's wide open for anybody's taking. And I know that a lot of Mets fans might have different opinions. There's not going to be a one size fits all solution in terms of what Mets fans are thinking David Stearns and the Mets should do and how they should go about things. But I think the overall notion that we would like to see more impactful moves this trade deadline is not far fetched. And I hope a lot of Mets fans would agree with that notion because David Stearns, again, he has a lot of naysayers and non believers in this fan base. I am not one of them. I believed in him from the start, but I'm going to need to see some action here this trade deadline, simply put. And I think that he has the ability and he has the awareness to do so. And I think that he will do it because this is the type of season that you go all in on. This is the type of roster that you have already built by bringing back Pete Alonso, Juan Soto, having the primes of the careers of a guy like Francisco Lindor and Brandon Nimmo. Regardless of what the production has been so far, this is the roster that you go all in with. You don't wait another year to have these guys all be another year older. The time is now for the New York Mets. The time is now. So again, really good first half of the season. I'm satisfied with the record. A lot of things to improve upon. Getting healthier helps, but the external pieces are needed. And we will be talking about these external pieces. In addition to the videos that I've already posted talking about some trade targets by the likes of Seth Lugo. I'm going to name you off all the guys that I've talked about this coming trade deadline already on this channel. Seth Lugo, Mitch Keller, Luis Severino, Carlos Estevez, Kyle Finnegan, Dennis Santana. I've talked a little bit about Byron Buxton and Jarren Duran and maybe some of the unlikeliness of them being moved. But there's a lot of ways in which David Stearns could get creative, multiple different avenues to take, so to speak, to get this team to where it needs to be at. Let's see it. Let's go Mets. More content coming soon, a plethora of content, both streams and videos. You're not going to want to miss it. I can guarantee you that. So make sure to hit that subscribe button, comment your thoughts and opinions, and smash those thumbs up buttons. I definitely appreciate it. Let's go Mets. Let's do the job, David Stearns. Let's get it done. Peace.